The Quiet World. In the vast and ancient heart of the Galactic Assembly, where stars themselves seemed to bow to the will of empires, Earth was nothing more than a whisper. The assembly chamber was a marvel of impossible engineering, an enormous sphere suspended in the void, its interior filled with drifting platforms of light and matter. Each platform represented a civilization, each one unique in form, color, and presence. Some glowed like miniature suns, others pulsed with organic rhythms, and a few existed only as distortions in space, visible only when one stopped looking directly at them. Here, power was not merely displayed, it was felt. Gravity shifted subtly around dominant species. Energy fields crackled with restrained force. Even silence carried weight, pressing down like the gaze of unseen gods. At the very center floated the Grand Conduit, a rotating structure of crystalline complexity that translated every language, every thought, into a shared understanding. It ensured that no word spoken here would be misunderstood. And yet, despite all its brilliance, it did not make all voices equal. Some were simply louder. The Carthaginian hegemony spoke first that cycle. Their representative towered over its platform, a being of plated exoskeleton and burning internal light. Each word it spoke vibrated through the chamber, resonating in both sound and mind. Our fleets have secured the outer rim sectors, it declared. 7 star systems now operate under hegemony law. Resistance was minimal. A ripple of approval moved through the assembly. Not admiration, never admiration, but acknowledgement. Strength recognized strength. Across the chamber, the Seraphine Collective responded, their presence manifesting as a chorus of harmonic tones rather than a single voice. Efficiency noted, however, expansion without stability invites collapse. Your projections indicate resource strain within 3 cycles. The Carthaginian representative flared with irritation, its internal light intensifying. Your concern is unnecessary. Your denial is predictable, the collective replied. Debate followed, calculated, precise, devoid of emotion in the way only ancient species could manage. They spoke of logistics, military projections, population control, and strategic absorption of lesser civilizations. Worlds were discussed like numbers, species like variables, extinction like an acceptable outcome. Far from the center, on a dim platform barely illuminated, the representative of Earth waited. Ambassador Lion Ortega stood alone. She was small by comparison, her physical form unimpressive among beings that stretched meters tall or existed as clouds of energy. Her skin bore the faint marks of gravity, her lifespan a fraction of the species surrounding her, her mind bound to a linear perception of time. To them, she was fragile. To them, she was temporary. To them, she was irrelevant. The placard hovering beside her platform displayed a simple designation. Sol System 3rd Planet Humanity. Status non-threat species. It had been that way since humanity's admission into the assembly. No objections had been raised. None had been needed. When Earth was first discovered, the assembly had expected resistance. Primitive species often reacted poorly to the realization that they were not alone. Panic, denial, aggression, these were common responses. Entire civilizations had burned themselves out rather than accept their place in a greater galaxy. Humanity had done none of those things. They had listened. They had asked questions. And then they had adapted. Within decades, they had established basic interstellar travel. Within a century, they had made contact with neighboring systems. Their technology was inelegant compared to the assembly, their ships inefficient, their understanding incomplete. But they improved. Slowly, quietly, consistently. That was unusual. Recognition granted to the Sol representative. The conduit's voice echoed gently through the chamber, drawing minimal attention. Several delegates did not even turn. Others regarded her with mild curiosity, like one might observe a minor fluctuation in a distant star. Ambassador Ortega inclined her head. "Thank you," she said. Her voice did not shake. It never did. Earth submits its quarterly trade report. Resource exchanges with the Lyran cluster have increased by 12%. Cultural exchange programs have expanded. We propose. Proposal unnecessary. The interruption came from a crystalline entity known as the Velori Consensus. Its voice was sharp, refracting through the chamber like splintered light. Your species lacks the capacity to influence macroeconomic structures, continue existing trade patterns, expansion would be inefficient. Ortega paused. Then she nodded. Understood. No protest. No arguments. Just acceptance. Around the chamber, attention drifted away from her almost immediately. Discussions resumed. Strategies unfolded. Plans for expansion, containment, and occasionally annihilation filled the air. Earth's voice faded into the background. Again, but silence was never the same as inaction. On Earth, far from the Assembly's distant gaze, humanity was anything but still. In orbit around their planet, hundreds of stations rotated in carefully calculated patterns. Some were visible to the naked eye, glints of light crossing the night sky. Others were hidden, masked by advanced cloaking systems or existing in partially phased states. Officially, they were research facilities, trade hubs, communication arrays, and many of them were exactly that. But not all. Deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, in a trench deeper than sunlight could reach, a structure pulsed with controlled energy. Facility Abyssal 9. Its existence was classified beyond the highest levels of civilian authority. Even most governments were unaware of its true purpose. Inside, humanity studied the impossible. A sphere hovered in the center of a vast chamber, its surface shifting between states of matter that defied classification. At times it appeared solid, crystalline. At others, it dissolved into pure energy, then reassembled itself into something that looked disturbingly organic. It was not human technology. It was not fully understood. And that was precisely why they studied it. Energy output is stabilizing, reported Dr. Amara Singh, her eyes fixed on the readouts. Stabilizing or adapting? Asked her colleague. She hesitated. On both. The sphere pulsed. For a moment, gravity inverted. Instruments flickered. Several scientists staggered as the floor beneath them seemed to lose meaning. Then it settled. Silence returned. Record everything, Singh said quietly. No one needed to be told twice. Elsewhere in orbit around a dying star, another project unfolded. Here, humanity studied something far older. The structure had been discovered drifting between systems, a relic from a civilization long extinct. Its design was intricate, almost artistic, but its purpose was unmistakable. It was a weapon. Or had been. Now it was a puzzle. Sequence incomplete, said the AI overseeing the project. Core functionality remains inaccessible. Then we keep trying, replied Commander Elias Vorn. This technology predates humanity by at least 2 million years. It may not be compatible with your understanding of physics. Vorn allowed himself a faint smile. Then we'll expand our understanding. And in places no map recorded, humanity explored something even more dangerous. Magic. The galaxy did not speak of it openly. Not in the assembly. Not in official records. But in the margins, whispered between traders, hidden in forbidden archives, encoded in artifacts deemed too unstable to study, there were references to forces that did not obey the laws of physics. Forces that bent reality. Forces that could not be quantified. Most species avoided them. The risks were too great, the outcomes too unpredictable. But humanity had never been particularly good at avoiding risk. In a remote outpost orbiting a gas giant, a circle of symbols burned with cold blue light. They were not technological. They were something else. Ancient, untranslatable, dangerous. At the center of the circle stood a single human. Her name was Ilara Voss. Containment field holding, reported a technician. Barely, another added. Voss closed her eyes. Begin the sequence. The symbols flared. The air itself seemed to resist what was happening, bending and twisting, as if reality were a fabric being pulled too tight. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something answered. A presence. Not visible, not physical, but undeniable. Several technicians recoiled instinctively, their minds brushing against something vast and incomprehensible. Voss did not move. Contact established, she said, her voice steady despite the pressure building around her. Translation. Partial. A pause. Then she spoke again. It doesn't think like we do. No surprise there. It's aware of us, she continued, and it's curious. Is it hostile? Voss considered that. Well, not yet. Back in the assembly, none of this was known. Or if it was dismissed. Because humanity did not act like a threat. They did not expand aggressively. They did not build massive fleets. They did not conquer weaker systems or challenge stronger ones. They observed. They traded. They learned. And in the eyes of the galaxy, that made them predictable. Harmless. That assumption would prove catastrophic. But not yet. Ambassador Ortega returned to her quarters after the session ended. The room was modest by assembly standards, a small, contained environment designed to accommodate human biology. Gravity was set to Earth normal. The air composition was precise. The lighting mimicked a late afternoon sky. It was comfortable, familiar, and entirely isolated. She removed her diplomatic insignia and placed it carefully on the table. For a long moment, she simply stood there. Then she spoke. Report. The room responded instantly. Walls shifted, light condensed into a holographic interface. Data streamed into existence far more than any standard diplomatic channel would allow. This was not public information. Not even close. Project Abyssal 9 progressing ahead of schedule, the system reported. Energy manipulation capabilities increased by 17%. Artifact analysis. Partial breakthroughs, integration remains theoretical. And the other programs. A brief pause. Advancements continue, risk levels remain significant. Ortega exhaled slowly. Of course they do. She moved to the window or what simulated one. Beyond it, the assembly stretched endlessly, filled with light and motion. Power. So much power. And yet, they have no idea, she murmured. Humanity had been called many things throughout its history. Curious, adaptable, resilient, dangerous. But above all else, humanity was something the galaxy had forgotten how to be. Afraid. Fear was not weakness. It was awareness. It was the understanding that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and often hostile. It was the knowledge that survival was never guaranteed. Other species had outgrown fear. They had become stable, predictable, certain of their place in the galaxy. Humanity had not. And so humanity prepared. For invasion. For disaster. For extinction. For things they did not yet understand. Because if there was one lesson humanity had learned, over thousands of years, across countless wars, disasters, and near extinctions, it was this. The greatest threat was not the enemy you could see. It was the one you never expected. And in a galaxy full of empires that saw Earth as weak, humanity intended to remain exactly that. At least, until it mattered. The war that shouldn't exist. The Zarveth Dominion did not announce war. They did not negotiate, did not threaten, and did not posture for dominance as lesser empires often did. There were no warnings transmitted across diplomatic channels, no ultimatums, no displays of force meant to intimidate. There was only silence. And then arrivals. The outermost listening posts of the Sol system detected them first. At the edge of interstellar space, beyond the scattered debris of ancient comets and drifting ice fields, something vast tore through reality. It did not enter through conventional means. There was no warp signature, no hyperspace corridor, no measurable transition. Space simply opened. Like a wound. Sensors struggled to interpret what they were seeing. Data conflicted with itself. Coordinates shifted even as they were recorded. Objects appeared in multiple locations at once, then resolved into a single, terrifying reality. The Zarveth Armada had arrived. They came in numbers that defied comprehension. Thousands of vessels, each one dwarfing the largest ships humanity had ever publicly displayed. Their hulls were jagged and organic, layered with structures that resembled both armor and bone. Energy pulsed through them like blood-glowing veins stretching across their surfaces. They did not move as ships should. They drifted, slid. Sometimes they simply were, existing in one moment and another without traveling between them. At the center of the formation loomed the flagship. A construct so massive it distorted the stars behind it. Light bent around its frame, creating a halo of warped space that made its true shape impossible to define. It was less a ship and more a presence. A declaration. The Zarvath Dominion had come. Within minutes, transmissions flooded every frequency. They were not messages. They were commands. Designated species human. Your civilization has been evaluated. Compliance is required. Resistance will result in termination. There was no malice in the words. No angers. No hatred. Only certainty. To the Zarvath, this was not war. It was inevitability. On Earth, the response came quickly, but not in the way the galaxy would have expected. There was no panic, no mass evacuation, no frantic attempts to open diplomatic channels. Instead, the planet quieted. Civilian broadcasts ceased, orbital traffic vanished from public sensors. Entire networks went dark, their signals collapsing into encrypted silence. To outside observers, it looked like surrender. Or fear. The Galactic Assembly watched from afar, their long-range instruments focused on the Sol system. Some recorded the moment. Others turned away. They had seen this before. A young species confronted by an ancient power. The outcome was never in doubt. Humanity will capitulate, said the Carthesian representative, its voice echoing through the assembly chamber. Their classification remains accurate, non-threat. The Seraphine Collective pulsed softly. Probability analysis supports this conclusion. Their technological index is insufficient for sustained conflict. And yet another voice interjected. It belonged to a minor delegate, one often ignored. Why has the system gone silent? No one answered. In the Sol system, the Zarvath advanced. Their fleet spread outward, establishing control over key gravitational points. Massive constructs deployed from their ships, anchoring themselves in space and beginning the process of system-wide suppression. These devices emitted fields that disrupted energy flow, communication signals, even the fundamental constants of localized physics. They had done this to countless systems before. Once activated, resistance became impossible. And still, there was no response. Hours passed, then days. The Zarvath moved closer to Earth, their formation tightening as they prepared for final assimilation. Still no communication. No surrender. No defense. It was unusual, but not concerning. Not yet. Proceed with occupation, came the directive from the flagship. And so they did. The first human ship appeared without warning. It did not emerge from warped. It did not arrive from any detectable trajectory. One moment there was nothing. The next, it was simply there. It was small. By every known standard, it was insignificant. Its hull was smooth, unadorned, lacking the layered armor or energy signatures typical of advanced warships. It emitted minimal radiation. Its power output was barely measurable. To the Zarvath, it was not even a threat. It was an anomaly. Identified came the command. No responses. Disable. A single Zarvath vessel moved forward, its weapons charging. The human ship did not react. It did not raise shields. Did not maneuver. It simply remained still. The Zarvath fired. Energy lanced across the void, a beam capable of reducing cities to ash in seconds. It struck the human ship directly and passed through it. For a fraction of a second, the human vessel flickered. Then it was gone. Target destroyed, reported the Zarvath unit. But the data did not align. There was no debris. No energy dispersion. No evidence of impact. It was as if the ship had never been there at all. Confusion rippled through the Zarvath network. A rare occurrence. They began recalculating, reevaluating, searching for error. They did not find it. Moments later, their flagship began to die. It started with a distortion. A subtle shift in the fabric of space near its core. Sensors registered fluctuations that should not have been possible. Energy readings spiked, then inverted. Internal systems reported conflicting data, each one contradicting the last. Then reality broke. Space folded inward, not around the ship. Through it, sections of the flagship simply ceased to exist, replaced by nothingness that did not behave like vacuum. It consumed light, energy, and matter indiscriminately, expanding in irregular patterns that defied prediction. Entire decks vanished. Command structures collapsed. The Zarveth did not understand. They had never encountered anything like this. Then something moved within the void. It was not visible. Not directly, but its presence was undeniable. A force that did not belong. A pressure that crushed against perception itself. And wherever it touched, the flagship came apart. Containment failure, the Zarvath reported. Unknown phenomenon detected. Damage escalating. Their responses were immediate, coordinated, efficient. They deployed countermeasures. Stabilization fields. Reality anchors. Weapons designed to neutralize anomalies. None of it worked. The flagship ruptured. Not in an explosion, but in unravelings. And in the moment of its collapse, human ships appeared. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. They emerged from impossible angles, slipping into existence from spaces that should not connect. Some appeared behind Zarvath vessels that had been isolated from all known vectors. Others materialized within the gaps between moments, their forms stabilizing only after they had already acted. They did not move through space. They moved around it. The Zarvath responded instantly. Weapons fired. Formations shifted. Strategies adapted. They were not unprepared for resistance. But this was not resistance. This was something else. Human ships vanished before weapons could strike them. Reappeared inside defensive perimeters. Phased through matter as if it were not there. Their attacks were precise, surgical, devastating. A Zarvath cruiser split cleanly in half as space itself sheared along an invisible axis. Another collapsed inward, compressed into a singularity no larger than a grain of sand. Entire formations lost cohesion as the distances between ships warped unpredictably, turning coordinated movement into chaos. Physics violation detected, the Zarvath network reported. Causality inconsistencies increasing. Engagement parameters compromised. And then, the symbols appeared. At first they were faint. Patterns of light etched across human hulls, too intricate to be purely decorative, too fluid to be technological. They shifted, changed, rearranged themselves in sequences that defied logic. And as they did, reality responded. Time slowed, not uniformly, not consistently, but in fragments. A Zarvath battleship fired its weapons. The beam extended halfway across the void. Then stopped. Frozen. Its energy suspended unmoving as if caught between seconds. Nearby, a human vessel drifted calmly past it. Untouched. Elsewhere, time accelerated. Moments collapsed into each other, actions occurring faster than they could be perceived. Human ships struck, withdrew, repositioned, all within spans that should not have allowed even a single movement. To the Zarvath, it was disorienting. To the observers in the Galactic Assembly, it was terrifying. They are manipulating temporal flow, the Seraphine Collective whispered, their harmonic tones fractured with something dangerously close to alarm. That is not possible, the Carthesian representative responded. It is happening. But time was only the beginning. In the depths of the battle, something else emerged. Something older. The symbols on the human ships flared brighter. And space itself recoiled. A circle formed around one of the vessels, its boundaries marked not by technology, but by something that felt almost ritualistic. Within that circle, reality bent. Then broke. Something answered. It did not arrive in the way ships did. It did not travel. It was simply there. A presence. Vast. Indifferent. Watching. The Zarvath felt it. For the first time in their recorded history. They hesitated. What is this? Their network demanded. No answer came. The presence moved. Not through space, but through existence. And wherever it passed, Zarvath ships died. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased, as if they had never been. Panic began to spread. Not as emotions, Zarvath did not experience fear in the way humans did, but as disruption. Their perfect coordination faltered. Their calculations failed to converge. Outcomes became uncertain. Uncertainty was unacceptable. Retreat, the flagship's remnants signaled. But there was nowhere to go. The Sol system was no longer bound by the same rules. Humanity had changed it. They had taken everything they had learned, every fragment of alien technology, every forbidden theory, every whispered rumor of impossible forces, and they had woven it together into something new. Something dangerous. Something the galaxy had never seen before. They had combined science and sorcery, and they had done it in secret. For generations, preparing not for conquest, not for dominance, but for survival. Because humanity had never believed the galaxy was safe. And now, they were proving it. Far away in the chambers of the Galactic Assembly, silence had fallen. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply watched. Watched as a species they had dismissed. Rewrote the rules of war. Impossible, someone whispered. But it was happening. And it would not stop. Because the greatest mistake the galaxy had ever made was believing that humanity's quiet meant weakness. The price of underestimation. The war lasted 3 weeks. For most of the galaxy, that number meant very little. 3 weeks was nothing, a statistical anomaly, a brief conflict barely worth recording in the timelines of ancient civilizations that measured history in millennia. Entire wars between established empires often stretched across decades, sometimes centuries, their outcomes shaped by attrition, politics, and the slow grinding collapse of resistance. But this war was different. For the galaxy, it felt like the end of everything. For humanity, it was restraint. By the 7th day, the Zarvath Dominion had lost control of the Sol system. Not through overwhelming force, not through a decisive battle, but through something far more unsettling. They had lost understanding. Nothing behaved as it should. Their ships, once flawless instruments of conquest, failed in ways that could not be predicted. Weapons fired and struck targets that no longer existed. Defensive systems activated against threats that had already passed. Navigation collapsed as space itself refused to remain consistent, distances stretching and folding in defiance of their calculations. Every engagement became a paradox. Every strategy unraveled. Human vessels were everywhere. And nowhere. They struck from angles that did not exist, retreating into spaces Zarvath sensors could not perceive. They appeared within formations that should have been impenetrable, bypassing layers of defenses without triggering alarms. To fight them was to fight uncertainty itself. And uncertainty was something the Zarvath Dominion had never been forced to confront. By the 10th day, the Zarvath had attempted to adapt. They deployed their oldest protocols, strategies reserved for threats beyond conventional classification. Entire fleets were reorganized into autonomous units, their coordination loosened to prevent systemic collapse. Reality anchors were deployed in greater numbers, attempting to stabilize the distortions spreading across the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed to work. Localized regions of space returned to predictable states. Human incursions slowed. Engagement outcomes became measurable once more. Hope, if such a concept could be applied to the Zarvath, began to form. Then humanity escalated. The first Zarvath world fell without warning. It was a core system, heavily fortified. Its defenses layered across orbital platforms, planetary shields, and gravitational barriers designed to withstand any known assault. No fleet approached. No weapon fired. No warning was given. The star simply dimmed. At first, it was subtle, a fluctuation in output barely noticeable against the background of cosmic variation. Then it intensified. Light faded, energy readings dropped. The fusion processes at the star's core began to destabilize not through natural decay but through interference. Something was draining it. Panic spread through the system. Emergency protocols activated. attempts were made to stabilize the star to counteract whatever force was affecting it. Nothing worked. Within hours, the star collapsed. Not into a supernova, but into silence. Its light vanished. Its energy ceased. And with it, the entire system went dark. Across the galaxy, observers watched in horror. Stars did not simply die. Not like this. Not without warnings. Not without cause. But humanity had found a way. By the 14th day, the Zarveth Dominion was no longer advancing. They were retreating. Not in formation. Not with strategy. But in fragmentation. Entire fleets attempted to withdraw, abandoning occupied systems, leaving behind resources, infrastructure, even their own units in desperate efforts to escape. Some succeeded. Most did not. Because there was nowhere to go. Humanity had not confined the war to the Sol system. They had expanded it. Quietly, precisely, unrelentingly. Zarveth's strongholds began to fall. Not through invasion but through isolation. Communication networks failed. Supply lines vanished. Entire regions of space became inaccessible, sealed off by distortions that prevented travel in or out. Within those regions, Zarvath forces simply disappeared. No battles. No signals. No survivors. And always, the symbols. They appeared everywhere human forces operated, etched into space itself, visible only when one knew how to look. Patterns that shifted and changed, their meanings incomprehensible, their effects undeniable. They marked territory, control, dominions, not of space, but of realities. By the 20th day, the Zarveth Dominion had ceased all offensive operations. By the 21st, they surrendered. It was not a formal declaration. The Zarveth did not understand surrender in the way other species did. They understood only outcomes. And the outcome was clear. They could not win. Their remaining fleets powered down their weapons. Their surviving command structures transmitted a single, unified signal across all frequencies. Engagement terminated. Humanity did not respond. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then the human fleets withdrew. Not entirely, but enough. The distortions began to recede. The symbols faded. Space slowly, cautiously returned to something resembling normality. Zarvath systems remained isolated, their infrastructure crippled, their capacity for further conflict effectively neutralized. But they were not destroyed. Humanity could have done it. Everyone knew that. They had demonstrated power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had rewritten the rules of engagement, shattered assumptions that had stood for millions of years. They could have erased the Zarveth Dominion completely. They chose not to. And that was perhaps the most terrifying part of all. The Galactic Assembly convened in emergency session. For the first time in its history, every major civilization was present. No absences. No delays. No indifference. The chamber, once a place of measured debate and calculated discourse, was filled with something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. No one spoke at first. They simply watched the projections, recordings of the war, simulations of the events that had unfolded, data streams that failed to reconcile with known physics. Every attempt to model humanity's capabilities resulted in contradiction. Every theory collapsed under its own weight. They have violated fundamental laws, the Carthesian representative said at last, its voice less certain than before. Correction, replied the Seraphine Collective. They have demonstrated that our understanding of those laws is incomplete. Incomplete, another delegate snapped. They have weaponized impossibility. Or perhaps, the collective responded softly, they have simply understood it. Silence followed. At the center of the chamber, the conduit activated. Recognition granted to the Sol representative. Ambassador Lion Ortega stepped forward. She looked exactly as she had before. Unarmed, unarmored, unremarkable. And yet, the chamber shifted around her. Not physically, but perceptually. Because now, they knew. She was not the representative of a minor species. She was the voice of something far more dangerous. How, the Carthasian demanded. The question echoed through the chamber, amplified by the conduit, carried into every mind present. It was not an accusation. It was not a challenge. It was a plea. Ortega regarded them calmly. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she answered, "We were afraid." The chamber fell silent. It was not the answer they had expected. "Afraid," one delegate repeated, disbelief evident in its tone. "You have demonstrated capabilities beyond any known civilization. You have dismantled the Zarvath Dominion in less than a cycle, and you claim this is the result of fear." Ortega nodded. "Oh, yes." She took a step forward. "Afraid of you," she continued. "Afraid of what might happen if someone decided we were easy to conquer." Her gaze moved across the chamber, from one delegate to another, each one representing a civilization that had, at one point or another, looked at Earth and seen something insignificant. "We studied your histories," she said, "your wars, your expansions, your solutions to resistance." No one interrupted. "We saw what happened to species that were unprepared, worlds that were assimilated, cultures that were erased, entire civilizations reduced to footnotes." Her voice did not rise, did not accuse. It simply stated, "And we realized something." She paused. No one was coming to save us. The words hung in the air. "So we prepared." The conduit translated her words perfectly, but it could not convey the weight behind them. "For war," she said. "For extinction. For the unknowns." Each phrase landed like a strike. "We studied your technologies," she continued, "and we learned from them. We studied your sciences. We studied your limitations." A flicker of something passed through the chamber. "Unease." And then, Ortega said quietly, "We looked beyond them." She did not elaborate. She did not need to. They had seen it. The distortions, the symbols, the forces that defied explanation. "You integrated anomalous phenomena," the Seraphine Collective said slowly. "A crude description," Ortega replied, "but not inaccurate." "You have destabilized the fundamental structure of reality," another delegate said. Ortega tilted her head slightly. "Have we?" she asked. No one answered, because none of them could say with certainty that reality had ever been as stable as they believed. "We did not do this to dominate," Ortega continued. "We did not do this to conquer." Her gaze hardened just slightly. "We did this to survive." The chamber remained silent, because there was nothing to argue with. She turned as if to leave, then stopped. "There is something you should understand," she said. Slowly she looked back. "We never wanted to be the strongest." Her voice was steady. "We just refused to be the weakest." And with that, she left. No one tried to stop her. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. Not through wars, not through conquest, but through perception. Earth was no longer overlooked, no longer dismissed, no longer categorized as a non-threat. It was something else now. Something undefined. Something unpredictable. Trade agreements shifted. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten. Entire civilizations reevaluated their strategies, their defenses, their understanding of what was possible. And always, there was the memory of those 3 weeks. The war that should not have existed. The war that humanity had fought. And won, because they had been ready. Because they had been afraid. Because they had prepared. And in the end, the galaxy learned a truth it would never forget. Power was not the greatest advantage. Knowledge was not the greatest advantage. Even technology was not the greatest advantage. The greatest advantage was the refusal to be unprepared. Because humanity did not win wars because it was powerful. Humanity won because it was ready.